Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Economy, Residence and Community Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Carl Lewis. I'm normally Vice Chair of this committee, but today I'll be chairing it. First item on the agenda is apologies. Over to Rachel, please, for apologies.
Apologies received from Councillor Angela.
Okay, and on to the second item of the agenda, which is disclosures of interest. Do we have any interests that need to be disclosed today? I don't believe we do. We'll give a moment. Okay, we'll proceed. On to item number 3 on the agenda, which is declaration of whips, party whips. I hope we haven't got anyone under that. No, good. Okay. On to item number 4, the previous minutes of the previous meeting, which were on the 6th of June. Could I believe that you've all seen them, and if you haven't, please let me know and we will pause for you to just read through them. But if you have, everyone has, please remain silent, and then I'll be looking for a proposer and seconder, as they were an accurate representation of what transpired that day. So could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Gwynn. And Councillor, thank you very much. Okay, we're on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the Local Development Plan Working Group Observer. I believe, Rachel, over to you for the nominations on that, please.
Yeah, we've had a few volunteers, and Councillor Adrian has kindly put himself forward to volunteer for that role.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Adrian Jones.
Thank you.
Is everyone happy with that? Is there no objections to that?
No.
Excellent, great. On to items number 6, free school meal vouchers to consider report from the Cabinet for Fair Paris and Connected Paris on finance and corporate transformation. Who would like to start us off on that, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick it up operationally. I appreciate we've got the Deputy Leader here, Councillor Matthew Dorrance. So if that's okay, Chair and Councillor Dorrance, I'll open up and go through. Firstly, thank you, Chair, for adding this item to the agenda today. Appreciate a short notice, but you'll understand the nature of the report, why it's been brought forward. It is a short report, Chair, and I don't intend reading it out. That would not please you, I'm sure, Chair, with the busy agenda you've got, and indeed scrutiny is on the committee. I thought if I just quickly run through some of the key highlights, and I'm pleased to say, Chair, we've got a couple of colleagues with me who can answer any of the trickier questions, like Sarah Coppell and Jenny, and Anne in terms of the finance. I'm sure members who've gone through will understand that the extended free school meal entitlement was confirmed as being removed on the 28th of June this year, and by Welsh Government. It has been extended and extended. That means we, given the fact that the school holidays are almost upon us, we've got to move fairly swiftly if indeed we do anything about it. I'm struggling a little bit with ICT, Chair, so forgive me. I'm just going to move a few things around. I'm not at my normal base. You'll see in the report we've got 2 costed options there, option 1 and option 2, very straightforward. We either accede to the Welsh Government's removal, or we continue it for this year, and I'll come on to that in a second. We're talking about a single year extension. The costs are there set out under section 3. There is always an element of uncertainty around some of the numbers, but that is real detail, in fairness, and Sarah spent a lot of time checking and rechecking the numbers to make sure they're as accurate as they can be at this point in time, but eligibility does change from time to time. And perhaps the meat of the report, Chair, if I may, is in section 4, really setting out the key issues for us. So the Cabinet will make a decision tomorrow as to whether it intends continuing the scheme, say for one summer only, or withdraws it in line with the Welsh Government withdrawal. I've touched on the fact that the entitlement, the voucher entitlement came out of COVID, but has been extended multiple times and helped through, you know, families through a difficult period in terms of, you know, holiday hunger, etc. Forgive me, I'm struggling to read the paper here, even though I wrote it. Right, I think we have a particular acute position at the moment in relation to we do not feel a sufficient time for families to adapt their budgets to deal with the removal of the voucher scheme. You know, given that it is literally upon us, and the vouchers would be issued from next week. It is probably worth mentioning the SHEP programme, and as we go forward, it is only a one-off. I mean, perhaps we can pick it up now. Perhaps it's in the discussion, and say Anne's on the call as well. The intention is to use our reserve, our risk reserve, to cover this extra cost. And the risk reserve is there for this very reason. When we have things that happen during the year, they're perhaps either not anticipated or may or may not happen. We always knew this was at risk, but obviously this risk has come to fruition. Not all risks do. We would cover it, but that is a one-off funding pot. So if we use it, it's not a permanent budget adjustment, and it would be then covered for this summer only. In terms of the often called SHEP programme, one of the solutions for us going forward would be to extend that scheme and get a broader coverage. Although that is something that it is for the schools to participate in, you know, to volunteer to participate in. We can't make it compulsory, but what we could do is look to really work hard with our schools to find out if we can what the concerns are, and see if we can get a broader coverage across the authority. And again, any questions in relation to that, I'd probably defer to the more detailed knowledge of colleagues such as Jenny. And as I say, it's a decision tomorrow for Cabinet to decide whether they support or not, and we'd be keen to seek the views of Scrutiny today. I've canvassed with that a little bit, Chair, but probably everyone's gone through it, and I don't want to be reading out what they've written. So hopefully that gives it a brief synopsis, and happy to pick up any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nigel. From my point of view, I applaud the Cabinet for taking this action, and I applaud yourself for going along with that. Obviously, this could have, in my opinion, could have been avoided whilst government dropping this on us sort of last moment just before the summer holidays. I have concerns, whilst I totally support what the Cabinet are going to do, option number 2, the preferred choice. I do worry if suddenly we had an unexpected large family referral to social services with complex needs, there'd be less of the reserves to go around. And reserves are there for unavoidable circumstances, as we know, and this, you could say, is one of them. But I just think that, you know, not just for this authority, but I feel that Welsh Government have dropped other authorities in this only a month before the summer holidays. I think it's not given enough time for authorities to react to it. And I just think that we need to, don't want to make it political or anything, but I think that we need to sort of maybe send a letter of some sort or acknowledgement that, you know, we put the authority in a very difficult position here to cover this cost for the summer holiday. And I don't think there's anyone on this call who would object to what the Cabinet are proposing to do, and I don't think there's an officer in Paris that would object to it. But I just think that we need to make, you know, Welsh Government aware of what a difficult position they've put the authority in. So I'll open up discussion. First I've got here is Councillor Adrian Jones, please.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Yeah, I just want to back up what you said. I think we absolutely got to support this scheme, but it's late in the day, and I think a complaint should be made to the Senate or whatever. Can I just ask for a bit more explanation on the voucher scheme, because it's new to me. I just want a brief explanation how that works, and leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Nigel, do you want to pick that up, or Matthew?
Yeah, sorry, go on. Did Councillor Matthew want to come in? I was going to ask Jenny to come in terms of the detail of the vouchers.
Yeah, Jenny, that's be fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The vouchers are administered through the catering service and are sent out to the families directly. There has been a split between families receiving vouchers and receiving direct BACS payments as well, depending on how they're able to receive the vouchers. So Sarah may also want to come in because it's the pupils, the learners who are identified on the EFSM scheme that receive the vouchers, and working closely with colleagues in incomes and awards to ensure that we have the correct numbers and the correct details for the families to be able to receive those vouchers.
Does that answer your question there?
No, I just want to know what you did with them. You take them to supermarkets or what? I don't understand quite how it
Oh,
works.
apologies. Yes. So there are various places that the families are able to take the vouchers to, and there are designated places. So there were requests from families in the past if they could potentially have a cash value for the vouchers, and unfortunately they need to spend the vouchers in the designated places. So yes, that's what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Arwell, please.
Yeah, well, actually, Chair, you've covered exactly what my feelings really. More than happy to support the proposal for Cabinet, but disappointed that Welsh Government only given us 4 weeks' notice that they're not prepared to support. But yeah, that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arwell. Councillor Gary Mitchell, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of things. I think if Welsh Government were here, they might argue that the SHEP scheme is arguably slightly more targeted to those areas with the highest sort of vulnerability. But it, as Nigel said, it's actually about then the schools taking on that responsibility, applying for the funding and the support and delivering it. So it makes it really challenging. I certainly don't have any issues with us as an authority supporting the preferred option at all. In fact, I think it's yet commendable. I think there is just that slight concern from me around how we do make sure that this support goes all the way down to the children that really need it. And that's, I think, where the vouchers are targeted for. But Jenny, did you say that in some cases they are direct BACS payments, as in a monetary payment to the family as well? Is there a mix?
There are some BACS payments to the families, but those are not as many as the vouchers. So my understanding is that the amount is a lot less in terms of BACS payments.
Okay, no, that's fine. And do we have the ability to track the vouchers being effectively cashed in? Do we get the figures the other end of the sort of system to say that they have been used in support of their children?
I can see Sarah's got a hand up. I believe they do.
I'll bring Sarah in, if that's all right.
Thank you.
Sarah, you're on mute at the moment.
We are able to track how many of the vouchers are used. Unfortunately, in a few cases, not all families utilise their vouchers for one reason or another, and the BACS payment is for those families that don't have access to email. So because the vouchers are issued over email, so that's a kind of a second option where they don't have access to tech really.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. My only sort of parting point is I realise that effectively in what Welsh Government have done is creating sort of disparity across local authorities. I've only seen one announced so far that they're supporting the scheme. I think that's Caerphilly. I think if we're going to respond to Welsh Government, that's part of the response as well, that we say, look, actually through your limited timescale of us being able to action a sort of a plan B, you are effectively creating disparity across Wales, and that's clearly what they try not to do very often. So it is disappointing they've come so late in the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gary. Just expanding on that, Sarah, with regards to direct payments, how do we ensure, I'm not saying that parents would do this, but how do we ensure, obviously with the vouchers, they're easily traceable and tracked and what have you, but with direct payments, how do we track that those payments are actually being spent on children's food?
Unfortunately, that's not possible. But equally, it's not possible to withhold the payment from a family.
No, not for a second. No.
have the access to internet or email.
Okay, so yeah, okay, we'll leave that there. Councillor Liz, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a lot of discussion around, you know, why this might have happened, but I think the important thing is that Powys does act on this now, and not least because 6 weeks is a heck of a long time for families to manage. If this had happened, you know, the sort of a week before half term, it might be a different scenario. But, you know, we're facing 6 weeks of pouring rain, you know, parents trying to feed their children, and, you know, adapt their budgets accordingly. So I do think we really must move forward and do this. And I think the SHEP scheme is a good one, but I understand that it only operates in certain parts of the county. And so, you know, in order to do the best for Powys, I think we need to move forward with it. And obviously there are risks and issues, you know, in terms of the amount of money, but that contingency is there for these sorts of situations. And the other point I just wanted to make is that it was raised earlier that, you know, we do need to make sure we've got the contingency for, you know, complex family situations. But I think if we face 6 weeks where children are not being given their £3.90 a day for their free school meal throughout the summer, then we're going to have much more demand on the Powys County Council's front door. So thank you very much, and I endorse the, you know, and want to see the paper going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Liz. Well, there are no other speakers wanting to contribute. Will there be a vote on this, Rachel, or is it just a silence if you're happy to go along with it unanimously for option number 2? I'll read the recommendations out.
Yeah, if I could help there, it's all about feeding putting the feedback from this committee into tomorrow's cabinet.
Yeah,
it's not a decision for this cabinet, in effect, if that helps.
But we need a direction of which way to support that, which recommendation this committee recommends. Yeah. So the thoughts I've had so far, people speaking, we're quite happy to go along with option number 2, which is, let's read that out. The sum of 280,000 is varied from the central risk budget to the catering budget.
Yep. Happy to support.
Yep. Everyone. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. I think we've
thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Conquered that one. Let's get my agenda back up. Okay. On to the homeschool transportation policy. Consider report going to cabinet for greener Powys. I believe, Matt, you've got a presentation, have you not?
Yes, I have, Chair, if that's okay.
Yep. Before I move on, Matt, is everyone okay with me writing a letter to Welsh Government outlining our concerns and what a difficult position they have put us in? Councillor Gary.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to just put my hand up to certainly agree to that, Councillor Carl. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that as well, please?
Yep, I'm more than happy, Chair. Councillor Hartwell.
Councillor Hartwell, thank you very much. Yes, please continue, Matthew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Excuse me. So this afternoon's presentations to look at the home to school transport policy, specifically around the wording, and then to gather Scrutiny's views, and then that will feed then into the a report that goes into cabinet for that wider consultation. So very briefly, the home school transport policy needs to be updated. It hasn't been updated for a few years, and we want to try and align it as much as we can to the school admission arrangements so that applicants can make informed choices. Also, we've got the public service vehicle accessibility regulations, or PSVAR, and they come into force in 2026. And at this point, we'll be able to sell space heats, which will achieve the motion, or achieve the motion. It'll go some way to achieve the motion set out in full council in October 2022. And what we're saying is, by aligning the school admission arrangements, the school transport policy, we will provide for a more transparent, cost-effective, and ultimately sustainable service. So key areas for Scrutiny's discussion today is to seek your views around the current open school transport policy, with a focus on the two areas, which is open school transport policy being aligned to the school admission arrangements, as in the catchments, and then the public service vehicle accessibility regulations, which will come into force in January 2026. And as I outlined earlier, at this point, we'll be able to sell the space heats, which will achieve some of the motion set out in the council in October 2022. And as I said in my opening statement, the comments from this scrutiny discussion then will then be taken into consideration when we prepare the report for Cabinet for their approval. And I think that before we actually go into the sort of discussion, I think it's just worth noting the open school transport budget. We have the largest open school transport service in Wales and transport around 5,500 learners to school, college every day. And that's about a third of the entire school population. And this costs around about 11 million per annum and can be broken down as follows. You'll see 219 dedicated mainstream open school transport routes, 62 additional learner needs ALN transport routes. In addition, around 1,000 learners travel to secondary school, college on public transport as well. The average cost per mainstream school contract, taxi 83 seat coach, is circa £200 per day. And the average cost per ALN contract is around about £215 per day. So you'll see the daily spend on open school transport for the 23-24 academic year equates to about £59,000 per day. So I think, again, when we have this discussion, I think we've got to consider the financial aspects of this as well, and the cost that the council have to incur every day to run the service, and the pressure for John and his team to keep within the budget area as well, because it is more and more demand on the service. So transport provision on catchment. So we've outlined the matters for consideration. So on the left, you'll see that parents would be able to see on a map which school we would provide transport to if they applied for a place in that particular school. If a school closes as part of the Transforming Education programme, the new catchment schools would be defined. Clarity will allow parents as well to make informed choices and potentially reduce the number of appeals. And again, I know that's something that's causing issues, particularly for you as members when people are coming to you on appeals. And again, I know that's something that needs to be considered as well going forward. By clarifying the policy and removing the word nearest, it would provide for a clear and consistent approach. With that said, there are issues as well for you to consider as a scrutiny. The catchment school will not necessarily be the nearest school, and John can explain, some of the dynamics around that, given the demographics of Powys. In the event of a school closure, parents may wish to choose another school, which could potentially be closer than the catchment school, so council would need to consider this aspect as well. If parents decide to go outside the catchment area, then this could result in no transport being offered. And by offering transport to the catchment school only would enable a consistent approach to providing open school transport to all communities. If it's okay, Chair, I'll stop there before we go on to PSVAR, because I'm sure there'll be enough debate just on this point. So I'll hold there, if that's okay.
That's fine, Matt. Members, open to you for discussion, please. Any questions? Don't be shy. I think, Councillor Arwell, please.
Yeah, so obviously we are looking now, to amend it from nearest school definitely to catchment. Because is there something in the Welsh Government transport policy that they supply transport to the nearest secondary school or not?
In the Learner Wales,
Wales, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, it does define nearest. So in our policy at the moment, we've got nearest or catchment, but John, do you want to come in on that, if that's okay, Chair?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, sure. In the Learner Travel Wales measure, it currently says local authorities have a duty to assess the transport needs to their nearest suitable school. And it can be a matter for the local authority to define what the nearest suitable school is.
Yeah, but would we contravene that policy then if we said that we going to give, you know, to a catchment school and do away with the nearest school? Or can we do that?
I mean, we'll take specific legal advice on this matter, but there are a number of other local authorities which specify catchment school in their transport criteria across Wales.
And not the nearest. Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. Councillor Gary, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it's, for me, the question or stroke concern is around simplicity for parents to understand the process that they're in and the ability for them to understand how it impacts them. So in my opinion, an area-based catchment approach that is clearly mapped and defined and available to the public at the point of selecting schools would help in that clarity of process, because we know that we've had some concerns where people have registered for schools but then later on found out they haven't been eligible for transport and either go through an appeals process which takes valuable time up, or they look at, right, well, which one do I go to and do I drive them myself, etc., etc. So I think having clarity over that definitely wins in my opinion, and it would remove some of the ambiguity that we've talked about previously around, well, how do you define the nearest school? Is it on a radius area from your postcode, etc.? Is it taking a certain route? Is it a route following the bus route? And all of those are quite subject to opinion, I would argue, whereas a clearly defined map that is out there works for me personally, but I would also argue that it probably works better for the primary schools and the clusters within those schools to fully understand where their pupils are coming from and how they're attributed. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's got a sort of counter argument to having that clarity.
John, do you have a counter argument for that? John Forsey, do you have a counter argument? Or Matt?
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, certainly the whole purpose is trying to create a far more when parents are applying for places, just to make it as streamlined and as seamless a journey for parents, and to make informed choices at the point of application.
My concern would be, now we're changing this slightly. We could have siblings in one school which was nearest, and with the new catchment areas, their sibling could be in another school. I do worry about that. Is there flexibility in there, John, for those scenarios?
Yeah, there are transition arrangements set out in the transport policy, and occasionally where there is a change in policy, it has led to positions in the past where there could be learners attending different schools from the same household. That's quite rare, but there's also an appeals mechanism as well that's available. So all this as part of the cabinet paper, we'll have to do some the impact assessment and take into consideration the points you're raising there, Councillor Carl.
Yeah, Councillor Howell's put in the chat, but they don't allow us to change the catchment. Then we go back to square one. Okay. I would like this committee to approve whatever recommendations and we put forward today, that this goes before the cabinet make a decision on this, that it goes before the Learning Skills Committee, because I think that they've conducted a lot of work on this in the past, and in my mind it should have not come to this committee at all, and it should have gone straight to there, to Gwynfor Thomas's committee for scrutiny. So I'll be looking for that recommendation afterwards. Councillor Adrian, please. You're on mute, Councillor Adrian.
There we are. Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing, Carl, because I'm sure learning skills got a lot more to input to this, and I would fully agree that the new plan would give clarity, but again, it's going to cause problems. Any,
I think
you break it up, Councillor Adrian.
system will make it something on the edge of catchment area, pretty closer to.
Councillor Adrian, I
another
think we missed what you said then, because you were breaking up. I think your signal's breaking up there. Do you want to go through what you just said again, so we get
Can you
what
hear
you
me
said?
now?
Try it again. Try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Right. From the beginning, I'm just going to agree with you, Carl.
You've dropped off again, Councillor.
can't- Oh, I don't know what's happening then. Sorry.
Do you want to put it in the chat? I can
Okay.
read it out. Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Peter James, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is the allocation of purchasing spare seats, and that will start in 2026. That's 3.5 years away. Is there any chance of getting that closer?
John, do you want to pick up on that one?
Yeah, I think we're going to pick up on the next slide, but to answer your point quite quickly, Councillor, it's more about how we manage the provision, the fleets that the operators are using. So we now have a clearly defined date which we can work to enable us to apply the scheme consistently across the council.
Okay, so it can come earlier then rather than later.
Potentially it could do, but I think that, you know, where we're working in a legislative environment, it's pretty clear for everybody to understand where we are with this. So I think if we have a fixed date, I think that's you know, if we can bring it in closer, fine. But you know, I think it's better to stick with what we know around the legislation and the timelines.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gary Mitchell, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just perhaps a couple of questions for those that might be online listening in to sort of hopefully help clarify things. But I think I'm right in saying that the catchment is defined on the residential property of the parents and the learners, not the primary schools being the key driver for that transport route or offer. If that could just be confirmed, that'd be great. That's one point.
John, do you want to pick up on that, please?
That is correct, Chair. From the normal place of residence is what's determining the transfer eligibility.
Thank you. And if there were multiple, let's say primary schools, probably more likely, catchments available, schools within their catchment area, that would be a parental choice? Or would there then be a sort of second tier that says actually you would go to your nearest one within that catchment area?
There would only be one school per catchment, so one primary school in a catchment, one secondary school in a catchment. We're not saying at all for any of this, parents have to go to that school. They've always got the choice, but we're just trying to make the sort of their options around school transport clearer around their admission choices.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question is perhaps we talked, or Matthew presented a figure of sort of 59,000 per pupil day currently. Has that figure been sort of remodeled up based on this potential catchment change? Does it stay the same? Does it go up, down, or are we not quite sure?
It's really difficult to model, and again, there'll be more details in any cabinet report clearly, but it's what we don't know is the known unknowns, if that makes sense. I know it's a bit sort of complicated. We know generally where people attend primary schools and what secondary schools they tend to apply to, and this would largely continue that provision. There would be some exceptions, but there would be some. So we'll get into the specifics of everything. I think we need to do a little bit more work on that modelling, but my 20 years of experience suggests that this is probably the line of least resistance in terms of what we're currently providing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gary. Councillor Arwell, please.
Yeah, just going back to what you mentioned about I mentioned at the pre-meeting that this paper should come to the Learning Skills Committee, but I was advised that obviously, given the fact that the transport policy and the school's mission policy, one is under the learning skills and the other's under ourselves. So, but I totally agree that the paper should be shared with the Learning Skills Committee. Really, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Nigel, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, picking up Councillor Aaron's point there. This is where the two need to come together, both transport and schools admission, and that's really the whole purpose of Matt and the team bringing this to seek early opinion and to put those papers in place to ensure we get that alignment between the service areas. So yeah, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Glynn, please.
So I suppose if the catchment area is going to be the only determinant of which school you get free which school pupils will have school transport to, I'm just wondering what the process is by which the catchments are determined, and what role is there for scrutiny and oversight, because there have been accusations in the past, perhaps unfounded, that catchment areas have been rigged or changed in order to make up for high vacancy rates in particular schools. So I'm just wondering what the role is for scrutiny of that process.
Going to catch that one, John, please.
Yeah, if I may, I think that's one for education colleagues.
Exactly the same thing. Thank you.
Well, okay, yeah.
But does that not underline the point that this should come before the Education Scrutiny Committee as well, the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee?
I feel like Sarah answer that, Chair. You'll understand perhaps a lot more if Sarah speaks before I do.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is kind of why I'm recommending it goes before learning skills. Sarah, please.
Yeah, just to give assurances, there's a statutory requirement for admissions arrangements to be consulted on annually with all chairs of governors of schools within Powys, with all voluntary aided and faith schools that undertake their own admissions, which currently we have 8, and that will go down to 7 as of September, with all diocesan representatives and with neighbouring local authorities. So we have to do that on an annual basis. So any changes to the admissions arrangements have to go through that process. And if there is a significant change, then we also are required to consult with parents as well.
Councillor Glynn.
Oh, sorry, pardon me, just the final follow-up. So just to absolutely clarify, it won't come before the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committees at all, or indeed this committee, and there's no role for elected members to scrutinise that?
I wouldn't say that it wouldn't, but the admissions arrangements are routinely consulted on annually. If there was a significant change where it was felt that scrutiny would lend weight to that, and indeed if it needed to go to cabinet, then it would be.
Okay, thank you. I suppose it's just because my point that actually the impact of changes to catchments in vacancy rates is it could be potentially pretty significant, and therefore has a massive effect on the transformation agenda, etc.
Absolutely.
Okay, Councillor Liz, please.
Well, Chair, only to say that I was previously on learning and skills, and I'm sure that we had a long paper and scrutinised the new catchment area, proposals that were put up, and there was quite a lot of debate, much of it reported in the newspapers afterwards. So I don't know if anyone else is here on, has also been on learning and skills.
I've never seen it. That's one committee I haven't been on.
Right, well, I think I'm probably right. I think that whole catchment, the proposals across the whole of Powys were scrutinised. It was quite a lengthy debate, as I recall, and I think that was fed back then. Okay,
Nigel.
I'm just going to agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Liz, Chair. I know Sarah and John and the team put an awful lot of work into that scrutiny of the catchments for learning and skills. So just to make that point, really, just in case there's any ambiguity. I'm sure Sarah's got the scars from that work.
Okay. It's just been noted, I know quite publicly with other councillors that this piece of work should have gone back to learning skills, and therefore I'll be putting that recommendation forward, Nigel. And if I'm perfectly honest, I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder for that. And I'll bring Councillor Jackie in for the portfolio hold, and if she has anything to say on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carl. No, I don't have anything particular to say on that. Just to say that originally we thought this was going to learning and skills, and then it was swapped to this committee. And we understand the reason why it was swapped to this committee is because of the issues around transport. And this is comes under that area. So it comes under my portfolio anyway, which does come under the scrutiny committee. But we have no problem in it going to either scrutiny. It will just be a repeat of what we got here, I suspect. But just to repeat what Councillor Liz said, and being a cabinet member as well, we still have the scars from cabinet on the catchment maps too. So there has been an enormous amount of discussion around catchment maps. And what we were trying to do here is to align the two things together. The catchment maps had to be done first, and this had to be done second. So that's why this is before you today.
Okay, just to recap on what Councillor Peter James brought up with the gap between now and 2026. We're going to address that in the next section, are we?
I think that's coming up in the next
Yeah.
section, and anyway, yes.
Okay, is everyone happy that we put the recommendation forward that it does go to learning skills? Can I have a proposer or seconder for that? Is that okay? Councillor Glynn, please. I think Councillor Glynn proposed.
I was just agreeing to propose it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for a second as well.
No,
Seconded.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
That's it, and I got Councillor Peter James as well. Thank you very much. So that will go before the Learning Skills Committee as well. Thank you. Okay, the part two of this paper, which is what is PSVAR. Matt, are you continuing through this?
Yes, please, Chair. So yeah, just another 2 slides. So this is the second part of the presentation. So this is the Public Service Vehicles Accessibility Regulations, or PSVAR. Applies to all new public service vehicles, buses or coaches, and it was introduced in 20. I think that should have been. I think it's a typo there, isn't it?
Yes.
2020. Apologies. So with a capacity exceeding 22 passengers. So under the powers contained within the Equality Act 2010, the government has made regulations that require all new land-based public transport vehicles, such as trains, taxis, buses and coaches, to be accessible to disabled people, including those who need to remain in wheelchairs. So the PSVAR will come fully into force in January 2026. And at this point, we'll be able to sell space seats, which will, as I've said, achieve some of the motions set out in full council in October 2022. Similarly to when we discussed catchment, we've set out a table here, which for you as members to consider. So there's matters for consideration. So we will be able to maximise any spare capacity on contracted school buses. Learners who live under the statutory distance will be able to make use of the service. Would sell a seat for those out? Would we sell a seat for those out of catchment? So that is a question, you know, that we need to consider. It will generate an amount of income. Reduced number of parents that follow the school bus as well, because I know, again, that's happening, you know, when I viewed appeals, and then because of choice, parents want to take their children to a specific school. We've got cases where they are following a bus that's going, so, you know, we're increasing the transport carbon outputs there as well. So there may be occasions in terms of issues where there's no spare capacity on the bus, or that seat may have to be relinquished if the spare seat is required by a statutory learner. So just need to be mindful of that. Need to consider the overlap with service transport provision, and this would provide for an element of inconsistency and potentially undermine the school's admission policy as well. The cost of the seat is not fully recovered as well from the charge that is made. So the average cost to transport a learner to school is around £1,500 per year. The charge for a vacant seat was around £400 a year when we was applying the policy. And this needs to be considered against the transport is running away running anyway, i.e. marginal costs. Reduced carbon footprint, as I just mentioned, about parents following as well. So you'll see from the HA there's pros, there's not pros and cons, but there's issues that we need to be mindful of if and when we do adopt that policy. And that's it on that, Chair.
Yeah, one of my concerns, Matt, is parents being able to purchase spare seats. That's only going to be available to parents who can afford it. Cost recovery on that being less than a third. I understand that we've got to put something in there, but I think it's £400. That's quite a lot of money to find if you've got children, and I think it's only going to be, available to those who can afford it. It's going to be about us and them. That's how I see it. Anyway, open up for discussion, please. Councillor Peter James, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question going back, Matt, that you said that the daily spend is 59,000 per day. With the fuel prices dropping, and also perhaps the changeover to electric vehicles, will that cost drop? And if so, would the spare seats drop in price as well?
Good question.
I could probably bring John in, but I would say with PSVAR, there is going to be potentially a further cost. And I think we just need to be mindful there is a year-on-year increased demand on the service as well. So I don't know if, John, you want to sort of come in on that?
Yeah. Again, without getting into the contract specifics, generally contracts are subject to an annual variation in line with CPI. So there was a fairly significant cost increase last year because of the inflationary pressures. Hopefully that will start to decrease. So contract prices will still probably rise, but not as much as they have been, if that makes sense. In terms of electrification, certainly it's well documented that the operational running costs of running electric vehicles are marginally cheaper in terms of the cost of fuel and the cost of maintenance. However, the capital outlay for electric vehicles is significantly higher. And I'm correct in saying I think Welsh Government are minded towards 2035 for school transport fleets to decarbonise. Again, I'll have to check that figure. And just to clarify the number on in the slide, it was actually the year 2000 when this legislation, PSVAR legislation, came into being. Government gave it a 20-year period because of the cost of vehicles, etc. Started with public service vehicles, the buses that ride around towns. They had to be compliant by 2006, I think it was. The issue around PSVAR is nobody in the industry, in local authorities across the whole United Kingdom, understood that PSVAR would apply to effectively what we consider to be closed school bus contracts. However, the Department for Transport had a very different interpretation of it. Hence, we are where we are right now. So just to clarify that point.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peter James. Councillor Glyn Preston, please.
A question and a comment, if I may, Chair. I suppose the question is, and I've had previous correspondence with officers about this issue, but I just wondered whether I can get a little bit more clarity in this meeting. Just wondering whether I can get some sort of narrative around why the vacant seat scheme was cancelled in the first place, because I'm not sure if I really understand the process by which that happened and why that was. And I suppose my comment would be just responding to your point about equity, Chair, in that actually there's an equity issue there, of course, already when it comes to parents driving their kids to school, and that actually, I suppose in many cases that £400 a year would actually be a very affordable choice compared to driving your children to school, I suspect anyway. So, personally, I'm in favour of this vacant seat scheme coming back. But yeah, I take your point about equity, but that's already kind of built in, isn't it? In terms of parents who are able to afford to drive their kids to school in the first place.
Okay, John, do you want to pick up on the first part of Councillor Glyn's?
Yeah, sure. I don't think we had any choice if we couldn't continue from what the Department for Transport was saying. It was not legal to charge for a seat, whether it was an individual seat or whatever, on a vehicle that was not accessible PSVAR compliant. I had electronic destination blinds, a passenger lift to get in and out of the vehicle. So hence that's why we suspended the scheme rather than cancelled it.
So I suppose when was it suspended, and you know, what part? Because I thought that this is coming into force in 2026. I suppose I'm just understanding. Was it when the interpretation came out of DFT, when they made clear their interpretation of the law? That's when you had to take the decision to suspend it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, and I don't want to sort of bore everybody with the details of this, but it was around about July 2019. DFT said, so bus and coach industry, are you compliant and ready for January the 1st, 2020, when all your vehicles have to be PSVAR compliant, because that's the end of the 20-year lead-in period from the year 2000, which then led us to this whole hiatus where DFT have had to basically extend the deadline to getting PSVAR compliant fleets, and that's been done over the past 6 years. Of course, we had March, that was in January 2020, and then we all know what happened in March 2020. So there's been work carrying on in the background to get all fleets up to PSVAR standard.
Yeah, John.
How is there any information gathering being conducted, John, to see how private transportation companies out there are managing to comply with this regulation, and is everyone up to speed? My concern is that some of the vehicles, smaller vehicles, or smaller firms as well, are going to find this almost impossible to continue trading. Has any sort of information been gathered on, are we going to lose operators within Paris because of this regulation coming in?
I think that there's 2 points to that, Councillor Carl. We know the market is under pressure as it is, so there's that aspect to it. In terms of smaller companies, it has been a matter for operators to declare what their fleet profile is over the past 6 years, and we're keeping abreast. I'm aware that there are certain operators in Paris who've got PSVAR compliant fleets. There are others who aren't at the same place along that journey. But by everybody having this deadline to work to, I think it's representative of people being able to make their investment decisions on that basis as well. And for example, we'll be retendering all the school contracts naturally expire in July 2025. So at that point, that'll be the other opportunity for suppliers to make those investment decisions.
That's why I'm a big advocate for smaller schools. I see a perfect storm coming in relation to small schools closing. Welsh Government targets for small schools anything above 96 pupils, and then having to take those into the bigger schools, those pupils. If we're going down this route, which we have to comply with regulation, we could see a reduction in operators within Paris. We could end up with some areas not being covered as well. So it is a big concern of mine, and that's why I'm a big advocate for smaller schools. Councillor Gary Mitchell, please.
Thanks, Chair. No, I think it's a good point to raise that sort of concern over who's ready for this or not, and will we struggle to fill some of those contracts beyond 2025. But my point was really around affordability, really, that we've sort of touched on. I think what I'm fearful of is making something that is too affordable outside of that current catchment route. So if this was extended to transport to non-catchment schools, then we sort of run the risk of not being able to plan ahead for who's filling those schools and where they're travelling from. And if we make it too affordable, we go to that sort of situation where people are choosing a school because they think it offers perhaps a higher educational opportunity, whereas what I believe we're trying to do through the catchment process is have a pretty defined system that says, look, all of our schools are really good quality, therefore you go to your catchment one because that provides the education you need, except for those circumstances where we know there's some enhancements either for physical disability needs or language or perhaps religion and stuff guaranteed. But I guess I'm just raising that fear that what we don't want to do is open the floodgates for those that just choose, I want to go to a different school and I'm making that choice, but I'll use a public transport system, if you like, to get my child there. Because it's affordable. So just clocking that as a concern, really.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Gary. Do you have a comment to make on that at all, John? Or
No, I think it's a good point, well made, and again, something for Cabinet to consider at a later date.
okay, good stuff. Councillor Adrian Jones, please.
Thank you, Carl. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes,
Can
we
you?
can. Yes.
I had to drop out for a while because of internet. Can you just clarify? You did say it was a larger bus, there's over 22 seats. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Okay. I think we've captured quite a lot of information and the points of view and the direction and views of this committee on that paper. Jackie, do you want to come in on this, or are you happy for us to roll on?
No, I'm very happy for you to roll on. I just picked up on a couple of points, really. I think there's been some really, really good points brought out here. And I'm really pleased to see people engaging in this and understanding the complexities, really, of the school transport system. It isn't easy. It's probably one of the most difficult things to do because you're dealing with emotions a lot of the time and two different services as well. Just to come back on something that was raised around supporting our transport network. We try really hard in Powys to make sure that we support small operators, and I know we've got about 68 different operators that we support across Powys. We have, I think it's a twice yearly meeting with those operators as well, which I've sat in on. They're very, very useful meetings. And I know John comes out feeling he's been scratched and scraped over the coals, but actually I know he does actually quite enjoy them because it does give us a lot of information all in one place. So we gather that information, and this is one area which obviously does cause concern. But until the buses are operating legally, we can't fill empty seats, and that's what this is really all about. It's about empty seats. It's not about increasing the number of seats. It's certainly not an income generator, as you will see. If we were raising £400 but it's costing £1,500, you can see it's going nowhere near to covering that. So it isn't an income generating the situation, but very grateful for the very good, very interesting debate here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Jackie. Councillor Alwell.
Yeah, just before you finish on this paper, Chair, I was just wondering, I'm quite fortunate that the local primary school has got two good secondary high schools within one is sort of 7 mile away, the other's 8 mile away. Should the school change the catchment area, the catchment from one school to the other, would Powys be prepared to, if they do go on the catchment travel, prepared to do the travel, to the new catchment school or that, the new high school or that catchment or not?
John, do you want to pick up on that one?
I'm not going to do the hospital thing past to Sarah, but that's all to be as part of the consultation process, the annual consultation around the admissions. Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but where a school decides to change its, I think it's really saying if a school changes its cluster, the primary
yes,
school
that's,
changes,
yeah.
So again, I think that's all part of the consultation around the school admissions process rather than the specific transport matter.
Right. Okay.
Sarah, do you want to add to that? Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
I would just absolutely agree with John. It would be part of the annual consultation, and a school could raise if it felt it would be best placed in a different catchment, and then that would be considered and responded to accordingly.
Yeah, well, I think that adds to the weight that it should be included in the Learning Skills Committee as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think Rachel, you've captured the thoughts of the committee on that paper. And obviously it'll be moving on to the Learning Skills Committee chaired by Councillor Gwynfor Thomas. Okay, just get back to my agenda here. So we're on to item number 8 now, which is the workforce planning report to be presented at the meeting. So,
hello, Chairman.
Hello, let me just get this loaded up. And who do we have presenting?
Yeah, you've got Paul Bradshaw. I'm
Paul Bradshaw, how are you doing?
We've also got one of my colleagues, Lynn Griffin, who runs the heads up the OD team.
I don't think I've met Lynn before, so welcome, Lynn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if it's okay, Chairman, Lynn's going to load up the PowerPoint presentation onto the Zoom meeting, and then we'll run through it between the two of us. So I'll just hesitate just for a few seconds whilst Lynn pops that up.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn. We did share these slides last week, but I was actually off, so I've had a chance to look at them this morning, and we just added 1 or 2 slides on, so they're slightly different to what you saw on Friday, but we can obviously provide them through the committee section later today. So workforce planning, thanks very much for the committee for finding time to listen to this item. I think I came to the committee around about February or March and asked if you could kindly add 1 or 2 workforce type items onto your agenda, which you've done onto your work plan. So thanks for that. I'm going to talk a bit about what workforce planning is, and then Lynn's going to elaborate more on what we actually do at Powys. So how do we translate a kind of a good process into reality in Powys? Starting point for me was, let's start with what is workforce planning, logical starting point. I actually love this slide. I didn't see it till this morning, but this has been written by the Local Government Association, and they seem to have got it right in my eyes. So if I go back 15 or 20 years, we always talked about workforce planning as being the 4 R's, and the 4 R's were the right person or the right people in the right place with the right skills at the right time. So there's 4 rights or 4 R's. I've been saying since about 2015, it's actually 6. So it's right person, right place, right skills, right time, at the right cost, in the right kind of role. So don't just perpetuate the past. We need to make sure we're getting value for money out of the actual roles. So it's 6 R's. Right person, right skills, right place, right time, in the right role, at the right cost. And the logic there, or a kind of a comparison there, is an operating theatre in a hospital. Do we want 2 consultants, or do we want a consultant and a theatre assistant? Do we want a nurse, or a nurse and a nursing assistant? So the NHS has become very good at defining the right kind of roles. So that's what workforce planning is. The second kind of golden rule for me is to keep it simple. So the simpler a process is to understand and operate and implement, the more likely it's going to work well. So I'm all for keeping it simple. When I got here, Powys was working to a 7-step workforce planning model. And when I looked at it, it was fine, but one of the steps had been kind of broadened into 3 or 4, which is why it was 7. We only need 4. And the thing about workforce planning, all workforce planning amounts to in its kind of narrow form is looking at where you are today, looking at where you need to be a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now, working out the gap between those 2 things, where you are and where you need to be. And then the 4th step is the plan to do something about that gap. So how do you recruit? How do you retain staff? Where do you look for staff? What skills do you need to develop? And so on. So workforce planning for me just needs to be a simple 4-stage process. That's what we do at Powys, which is great. The next step for me then, which is where Powys was at when I joined in 2019, is it needs to be integrated into the general business planning process. And the way I kind of look at that is, you go back to 2015, if you go into the account of any local authority or the account of any NHS trust, what you'll see is they only ever delivered about 65% of the improvement programme. So if a council set out to find £10 million worth of efficiency or savings, they only ever found 6.5 million, and the same in the NHS. And the main reason I saw as that being a kind of a causal effect was they just weren't setting themselves up to succeed. So when you plan, you need to think about the actual thing you want to achieve, the outcome or the improvements or the objective. But you also need to think about what staff have we got that will actually deliver that objective, what skills have we got, what IT systems do we need, do we have the budget in place, do we need to put some investment in to get that £10 million worth of savings out? And that is integrated business planning. Now, the great thing is I came to Powis and that was on the agenda. Powis was integrated business planning. So it needs to be simple, it needs to be integrated, and we need to think about those 6 kind of R's. So that's workforce planning in a kind of a broad kind of brush. You just bear with me just a sec. I can't actually, I can see those notes. I can see those notes, Lynn. Thanks very much. Yeah, so that's it in a broad brush. If we go to the next slide, please, Lynn. I think Lynn's going to take you through this one.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah. So the model that you can see in front of you there, sort of briefly, is taken from the CIPD and outlines how sort of workforce planning underpins and also contributes to other areas of our work within the authority. So the HR and OD teams are the people professionals who enable, if you like, workforce planning to happen. But the service areas and their people have the knowledge and therefore are able to develop the action plans and have the responsibility for each of the service areas. So at the base there, we see sort of things that sort of might crop up in various workforce plans. And all these are taken and then interpreted, if you like, into our workforce strategy. So they all align, and what we have produced in our new updated workforce strategy is taken from the workforce plans that were developed last year. So different service areas will have different priorities at different times, and therefore, as Paul mentioned, that process needs flexibility, but we also need consistency in the way that we actually workforce plan as well. And I think for me, this model or this design there sort of is quite reassuring, really, that Powis County Council is following that process that the CIPD is recommending. We are actually linking then that workforce strategy to our business strategy, and from there on into our corporate plan and corporate strategy as well. And so I mentioned our workforce strategy that will be coming out for consultation shortly. So for me, it's not just a theoretical model, it's actually happening within the council. We are actually delivering on this. So the next slide might look a little negative initially. Why does workforce planning fail? Well, this is what the LGA have produced, and they are saying that we can learn from others. So it's about having an awareness of what could stop the process from working well. What can we learn from others? And this was a piece of research that the LGA did, and this is what they found, that there are misconceptions as to what workforce planning actually is. It can be too time-consuming, and managers don't actually own it. And as Paul mentioned earlier, it can be too complex, hence why we've gone with that 4-step model, which is fairly straightforward. So we try to make it simple, we try to make it relevant, and we try to get managers to actually own it and see that it's worth doing and undertaking. So I'm going to hand over to Paul next.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, so just a bit of background and history. So workforce planning has been in Powis for quite a number of years. And I joined in 2019. It was part of the integrated process, or we brought it into the integrated process back in 2019. We've been working with services ever since to support them in producing an individual service plan. And Lynn will take you through the detail of that in the next slide. But we've had the kind of support or help of Audit Wales twice in the last 4 years. So they came in late 2019, early 2020, just before the pandemic, to look at how we workforce planned in Powis. And I think it was part of an overall programme of audits they did around the council's ability to transform and move forward. So they came in and spent quite a number of hours with me and Lynn's predecessor, somebody called Family Davis. And when they left, the auditor, just trying to think of his name, the auditor Gareth actually said he completely reappraised what he thought about workforce planning once he'd met Powys. So what he advised was, in Wales, what they tended to do was talk about the workforce as being a brilliant asset, and we need to invest in the workforce. And we did that. Obviously, we saw workforce as a very valuable asset. But what we did was different. Was we actually looked at 12 services. We actually shaped up a plan with each service and looked at it bottom up as well as top down. And we hadn't seen a bottom up analysis. And for me, you've got to look at it bottom up. So each service needs to think about, where are we going? What have we got? What's our gap? And what are we going to do to develop that staff or to plug that gap? We did that in Powys back in 2019-20. So we got very good audit kind of feedback. It's somewhere in the notes. Yeah, they found that overall, the stronger workforce planning meant that Powys County Council was better placed to support its transformational objectives. And that's exactly what you want to hear from Audit Wales. They came back in the final kind of quarter of 2022, so around about October, November 2022, I think they came back. But they looked at all 22 local authorities in Wales, and there's something called a springing forward audit. And that audit looked at each council's physical resources, the assets, the buildings, but also the workforce. And they're looking at how ready was the council, ready to spring back after the pandemic and be able to kind of hit the ground running. Now, they looked at all councils, and the feedback we got from our auditor was there was 2 minor recommendations, I think, and they were about to highlight workforce items to scrutiny chairs. And that's why I came to this committee back in February. And this is one of those workforce items. So that recommendation has now kind of manifested itself as a reality. But the second thing they said was, could we continue to further develop our workforce benchmarking activity across Wales? And I'm chairing an All Wales benchmarking group. And we've basically cracked the recommendation for the rest of Wales. But importantly, the auditor said to me, go and read the other 22 or the other 21 reports. Yours is very good. Powys County Council's one is very good. So I went and read them. There was only 12 on the website at that point in time, but I looked at the other 12, and they all had a similar one around benchmarking. But everybody else, bar another council, I think Monmouthshire had quite a good report, but everybody else had either a finding to go away and develop the workforce planning, and also some of them had a second finding, which was to go and develop a workforce strategy. Now, the auditor, because we had a workforce strategy in place that's been refreshed, Lynn mentioned it before, because we had effective workforce planning in place, she said, there are no findings around workforce planning, Paul. You just need to look at benchmarking and make sure members have a greater opportunity to scrutinise workforce matters. So the reassuring thing is in 2019 and 2022, we got very kind of positive, reassuring kind of audit reports. So they're impressed with our workforce planning. I think the third thing that happened more recently is Lynn and the team responded to a national Welsh LGA kind of, I think it was a kind of a survey, and she responded to that survey about where we're up to with workforce planning, and they saw some positive things in our response. So they've come directly to Powys to capture what we do, to learn from us, but also to share their expertise and skills. And I think from that, what will come from that is I wouldn't be surprised if we become a beacon of kind of good practice, but also we can get some benefits from it, Chair. Yeah, so each year, so I said a lot there about the history, but each year we support the service of workforce planning. Lynn will take us through that in a moment. We then go away and kind of refine our process further, just to try and develop it further and simplify it, make it easier to follow. And I think I'll hand back to Lynn now. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, so what is our current process? How do we carry out the workforce planning? Well, each service develops a workforce plan, and as an OD team and HR team, we support them through offering surgeries and sort of dedicated time, if you like, to take them through the process. But it's a continuous support process over a 12-month period. So, and that sort of support is offered through our HRBPs, who provide relevant workforce data so that service areas can make the appropriate decisions and choices around their workforce, etc. And that sort of supports that planning process. So this information is all pulled together so that a report can be produced for EMT on the service and the organisation-wide position. From this then, a corporate development plan is commissioned and delivered, and Paul pulls that together. Alongside that sort of workforce planning, we carry out a learning needs analysis as well. And so that services are actually identifying the learning and training needs that their staff require, so that we can ensure we have an appropriately skilled workforce. And so this supports then services in developing service-specific development plans, so that each service is aware of what training, what development that workforce requires. As Paul mentioned, it's a bottom-up and top-down approach and has been well received. So going forward, we now want to place greater focus on strategic workforce planning. So workforce planning is done with service areas and generally focuses on their current resource and headcount plans and operational plans for the budget year ahead. Whereas strategic workforce planning looks towards a 3 to 5 year time horizon, and that assesses and analyses internal business drivers, goals, etc., and will provide us with a framework to meet the challenges which we are facing actually now with sort of all the transformation work that is going on, I suppose, during what is a complex and uncertain time really for us as an authority. So what sort of good practices have we seen through workforce planning? I've just put sort of several examples here from different service areas. So social care have developed a grow your own initiative. They found it very difficult to recruit social workers, so have decided to sort of provide sort of staff with upskilling opportunities, upskilling them through degrees, etc. So we are growing our own. We've had a recruitment and retention programme going on, and as part of that, we've developed an easy apply scheme where staff, for example, I think it was housing, they in their recruitment roadshow, they were able to recruit people quite quickly. They had 28 posts and had 72 people apply. IT have been developing career pathways, and this is something we'd like to roll out across all service areas, particularly those service areas who are finding it difficult to recruit. Planning, they've done a team development journey, been working with our OD officers in looking at their team and how they can develop as a team. And ourselves within WAD, we've been looking at our skills development and supporting the continuous professional development of our HR advisors and OD officers. We've been working, as Paul mentioned, with the LGA, but also with CIPD. We've used apprenticeship schemes across different service areas. HTR have been particularly good in recruiting apprentices, and that's growing, and that sort of the success that they've experienced is being seen sort of rolled out elsewhere as well. I mentioned the recruitment roadshows, and then transformation and democratic services, they're using data platforms for critical planning.
Now, I wouldn't mind just adding a few comments there, and just a bit of detail really on the Grow Your Own initiatives members. The example there is in Children's Social Care, and Holly Gordon joined us a few years ago, I think, and she's kind of enhanced that Grow Your Own initiative from 2 or 3 people a year to 12 or 13 people a year. So it's been massively kind of cranked up, and there's lots of benefits from that. Obviously, if we can grow our own, we can successfully recruit from within. But secondly, it means, you know, you get a permanent social worker. That young person's got kind of like continuous contact with one person rather than one agency person replacing the next agency person. But thirdly, if we can do that and we can recruit from the general market as well, we can start to off-hire some of the agency social workers. And every time we off-hire an agency social worker, we can save, and I've not looked at these figures for a long time, so off the top of my head, but it's about 25k cheaper to employ a social worker than it is to pay an agency for a social worker. So that's a massive kind of outcome in children's services from workforce planning. Looking at the 1/3 from bottom, the use of apprenticeship schemes. In the last quarter, we've offered 6 jobs out to apprentices. So 6 were advertised, 6 have been filled. 3 of those 6 have started in recent weeks. The other 3 start during this quarter. So the apprentices are starting to kind of crank up as well from 7, 8, 9 a year to 6 offered in 1 quarter. So we're starting to see real benefits. Thanks, Lynn.
And I'll hand over to Paul.
Yeah, so in terms of continuous improvement, we'd obviously want to improve the process each year, make it simpler, automate it as much as we can, so on and so on. What we're doing this year is we're doing this work we mentioned before, the LGA. So they were impressed with us. They've come to us. They've offered some free support and free investment. So we're looking this year at strategic workforce planning more so than ever. And they spent some time last week with There to Service, and they're joining the EMT in 2 days' time. So they'll talk about what strategic workforce planning is, what our roles are, and how we can help kind of push that along. The other thing we've done is we've had a look at where the HR team is in terms of our ability to support the council on its journey to excellence, and how can we support the council with its new corporate strategy. And from that, we can see there's some areas where we can invest some more time and effort into the team, and one of them is workforce planning. So the CIPD, which is the Institute for Personnel and Development, our professional institutes, they're helping to deliver courses and put some focus in around workforce planning. And I think, Lynn, that was a 4-day course, wasn't it, over a number of weeks?
Yes.
Yeah. So we put all our HR business partners through that, and the OD staff. And the reason it's both is HR business partners will actually sit down with the services in the second half of this year and help them workforce plan. But then as those things become reality next year, they should be in those kind of service performance meetings to make sure those workforce plans are being picked up and delivered, and support services in doing that. And obviously the OD team is in the background making sure all the OD interventions happen. But also they sit down with the services to try and gather the workforce planning information each year. So we're looking at strategic workforce planning across HR and OD, and also across SLT and EMT. So that's it. And some final bullet points which Lynn's added for me, which is around toolkits and frameworks. So we're going to develop further toolkits and frameworks, and make sure we do it in a kind of consistent manner across the council. So final slide, really. Future developments. We always want to improve. I think it's important, the kind of thing I mentioned about Holly Goulden before and their 13 grow your own social workers. I think where we do something really, really good, it's important we talk about it and celebrate it. So we'll find ways to promote workforce planning through celebrating the good work that people have done, so we keep it kind of popular and on the agenda. And obviously, we'll put a lot of time into workforce planning over the next year. We'll support services, and we need 12 services and 12 management teams to invest their time too. So that's workforce planning in a kind of 20-minute nutshell. Thanks very much for your time, and we'll be made up to take any questions, observations or feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, Lynn. That was very positive, I thought. Yeah, so open up for questions. Anyone has any questions on those slides? Don't be shy.
I think if any members think of any questions later, we're always around to take emails, phone calls, or at any point. So,
okay. Anyone? No? All satisfied? Happy to note that? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Lynn. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Okay, just bear with me, members. I operate on one screen. I prefer it that way, but it does slow up a little bit when you're going from one item to another. Item number 9, procurement climate action plan, to receive action, climate action plan. Who's taking us through this?
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Wayne Wilesby. I'm the commercial lead for procurements and commercial services. I'm not sure how these
I don't think we met before, so
No, that's right. I joined the council in September. Had a sort of background in a number of senior commercial roles across local government, and delighted to be at Powys. In terms of I have a few slides. So Rachel, I'm not sure if you share them or I'll share the slides I already have.
If you can share them, Wayne, that would be great.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, certainly will. Thank you. I'm not that used to sharing on Zoom, I'm afraid. So hopefully this works.
Yep, I've got something coming through.
Right. Okay. Yeah, like I say, my name's Wayne Wiles. I'm the professional lead for procurement and commercial. I think I've met a number of people, but not all of you. So great to be here, and look forward to taking you through some of the slides in relation to the procurement climate change action plan. What I thought would be helpful to set some context. So apologies for those people who already know this. But I thought it was helpful really to sort of set out some of the sort of key terms and the key sort of activities under the climate emergency aims of the council and how that relates to supply chain. So what we have in terms of we have scopes 1 and 2 and 3. So scope 1 is the direct emissions produced from our infrastructure, so buildings, etc. Scope 2 are those services that support scope 1, so that would be things like utilities and energy. And then scope 3 is the indirect emissions relating to areas such as the supply chain, business travel, staff commuting, etc. Then in terms of the next slide, once we talk about scope 1, 2 and 3, and as I said, the focus in terms of my presentation relates to supply chain, scope 3. There also is tiers 1, 2 and 3 in terms of the analysis, in terms of identifying that. So tier 1 uses a space-based approach using Welsh Government methodology to seek to try and identify what our carbon emissions are within our supply chain. Scope 2 is actually looks at a bit more granular level and takes an average of particular spend categories and what is typically the level of emissions that you would see either in transport or within social care, within IT, etc. And then tier 3 is very much about having a real fine granular level of data relating to that particular supplier and what their specific emissions are. At the moment, as is happening across Welsh Government, we are typically applying the tier 1 approach. Some methodology has been brought out by Welsh Government in relation to tier 2, so it takes that more spend category average. And the suggestion is that that will become a mandatory requirement in September next year, although that's purely a suggestion at the moment. So we're yet to hear that sort of that clarity, but we're already started on that journey to try and understand at a more granular level of what our emissions look like as an organisation within the supply chain. If I move to the next one, what we've actually done is so. Many of you will already know that actually from a spend point of view, our spend in the last financial year within our supply chain was 252 million. Highest spend of that was social care. Lowest spend actually of the key spend categories of how my team is structured relates to highways and environmental. So things like transport, etc., is within that. However, if you look at
sorry. Is there any chance you can make that a little bit bigger? It's really hard to read.
Sure.
Apologies.
Does that help?
That's better. Yeah, that's better.
Right. Okay. Yes, I think it's in the slide pack as well. But so what we've identified using the sort of tier 1 calculator that whilst the spend is smaller than social care for the likes of transport and highways, the actual emissions factor within those spend areas are the greatest. And what we've actually identified from these 4 key spend areas, that actually the greatest 33%, a third of our emissions levels sits within that transport and highways supply chain. In total, the 84 million kilograms of carbon emissions that sit in the supply chain equates to 73% of our total emissions as an organisation. So that is by far, nearly 3/4 of our emissions as an organisation sits within our supply chain. So clearly a significant focus for us in terms of hitting and achieving the 2030 targets of net zero, is to make sure actually we're doing all we can in terms of new contracts when they're coming up, to actually identify and drive through greater emissions reductions within those new contracts. And given the time challenge we have in some of our largest emitters, we need to be engaging with those suppliers of those current contracts as well, to see what mechanisms we can put in place to seek to try and reduce those the level of emissions that we currently see. What I've now got is my action plan for the commercial activity across the organisation. Of course, my commercial team is very much an enabler, so we don't work in isolation. We're an enabler to the rest of the organisation. So working closely with our colleagues in various different service areas to identify and drive through these opportunities. So in the first instance, I've condensed these into two slides with a number of activities that we've set out within that. And the first instance is about the carbon accounts. The carbon accounts requirements for us as an organisation is set for the September. So we did that last year in terms of the carbon accounts based on our spend for the financial year 21-22. And then actually we're now working on the spend data for 22-23, just gone and finished in March, to update our carbon accounts and submit those to Welsh Government in advance of the deadline in September. So that's happening, and that's progressing well. The next strand is actually about how do we seek to influence new contracts to drive out emissions within those, and seek to put in mechanisms to achieve that contribute to that achievement of the 2030 net zero target. So we've influenced 31 contracts so far, and of course that's an ongoing process to influence new contracts as they come through the commercial life cycle, to try and embed those requirements. And that is around things like circular economy, looking at alternatives around recycle, reuse, etc. And also about that sort of that key aim to reduce target the CO2 emissions that we currently see in those current contracts. The next strand actually to support this is actually not only about embedding that requirement into contracts, but also embedding the requirement for increased data reporting from our contracts. So that's a requirement for us as an organisation and Welsh Government. So we're embedding that aim within our contracts. And then the fourth strand under this is we've done a market research of our supply chain. The suppliers that all contribute to that £252 million spend that we spent last year, to understand where they are in terms of their knowledge and awareness around carbon reduction, and what mechanisms they've got in place for that. I've got to say it's limited at the moment, and so there's a lot of work that we need to do in a very targeted way of our suppliers. If I move to the next slide, so the next slide actually is looking to achieve net zero plans from our key suppliers. So what we've done is targeted our suppliers who are responsible for the highest spend. So in the first instance, we're looking for all the 15 suppliers for which actually we spend £2 million a year, and securing carbon reduction plans on those. We're behind schedule in terms of trying to achieve those. That's very much about the weaknesses that I think across the supply chain, not just ours, in terms of the knowledge of this agenda, and how we then would need to work with those suppliers to drive this forward. And I'll come on to one of our plans for that in a moment. So we're doing that in this series of sort of cascade approaches, looking at our supply chains, looking at the top spend areas in the first instance, and then working our way down that list. The second line in terms of our action plan is actually about setting the target, reducing our carbon emissions by 10% in those top spend areas. So at the moment, we're doing a lot of work to really understand who those suppliers are, what their carbon emissions are, and how we actually can seek to either change those contracts by the sort of reletting process, to make sure that actually we don't go out and undertake award contracts with the same mechanisms. We actually award contracts with a reduction in carbon embedded within that. And if those contracts actually aren't expiring for some period of time, then we need to be engaging with those suppliers, those current suppliers, to see what changes we can make going forward. The third strand I've got here around the supplier carbon reduction planning portal. We've identified through some of our market research that there is a challenge and a gap in terms of knowledge and awareness on this agenda. So what we've looked at is 3 mechanisms to bridge that gap. Two organisations that provide that support. We're also in discussions about if we were to do that internally. But effectively, it's a calculator, an assessment tool that allows suppliers to assess where they are in terms of their emissions and what improvements they can make to try and reduce that. And we're looking to finalise our approach on that with an aim to have that embedded and ready to go live in November to support those organisations. The next one is around the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. So we've introduced a new mechanism within our procurement, so anything above the tender threshold, that actually we seek to identify any within all of those procurements objectives for the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. And then finally, in terms of the strand there, not only do we have a gap, or historically aware gap in terms of our supply chain, there's a bit of a gap as well in terms of across our organisations. So what we've created is a green network, and the green network is an in-house community of individuals looking to know more, looking to see how they can get involved. And so actually they are looking to through that community and sharing that knowledge and sharing those experiences about looking where they can make those changes, not only in the workplace but also at home as well. So actually that's building that sort of groundswell of knowledge and information, so people can come to us, come engage with my commercial team, and come to us with ideas about what can we do, what changes can we make, can we do this, can we do that, etc. So I think we've now had 3 of those meetings, and there's been a real sort of interest and a sort of growing appetite for this. And that will form part of our DNA going forward. That actually not only are we considering about certain requirements of contracts to meet particular needs, but actually we're doing so in a way of what additional mechanisms can we meet those needs, but but at the same time reduce their carbon emissions. So that is a quick sort of run through. So thank you very much for that, and obviously open to any questions if anybody has any. If I stop sharing, I'll be able to see hands then. So
okay, well, while you're doing that, Dwayne, I've got a question for you. What percentage of terms of carbon emissions does Wales equate to in the total amount the UK produces in carbon? And within Wales, what is the Powers's percentage of carbon emissions within Wales?
I will have to come back to you, Councillor, in terms of that. I can certainly find the information, and I'll be able to respond to you on both of those questions.
Thank you very much. My other question is, will you be actively, sounds like you are, changing contracts to suppliers who are actively taking steps to reduce their carbon emissions? And do you think that this may price out smaller suppliers who cannot adapt quick enough due to, the costs of buying new vehicles, etc.? And what support will you be providing as a purchaser, and what can you do to mitigate that that hard fall for those suppliers?
The aim of the work we're looking to do. So one of the things I've introduced since I joined the organisation is about for us to look at the full life cycle. So that's the pre-procurement stages, about looking at options, looking at different routes to market, looking at different ways to meet needs, etc. So we consider that both with a financial lens and also a carbon reduction lens as well, looking at those options. The key bit about making sure we don't price out local suppliers, my aim is actually that we put a number of mechanisms in place to give those local suppliers the competitive advantage. So in fact, they are more likely to win contracts going forward, because we're actually working with them about what mechanisms they can put in place to reduce their carbon, and therefore that will form part of our evaluation process going forward. So that's the aim of that.
Could you give a basic example of what that support would look like?
The support will look like, so I mentioned that information tool, so that would be heavily promoted in terms of our local suppliers, so they get a better understanding. Looking at them and working with Business Wales about how to tender and how they put together tenders actually to in a way that considers these aims of the organisation, not just from a financial package, but also about pre-market engagement. So talking with local suppliers about how the mechanisms in which we can meet needs. So actually, we don't just issue a tender whereby we haven't considered actually about the best approach or the local market response to that. We won't be able to do it every time, because actually we do need to make sure we're complying with the rules around equal treatment, etc. But I think working with those organisations to set out what our key aims are going forward and how they present tenders in a way that actually meets our needs and secures sort of maximum marks for that, actually allows them to, like I say, gain that competitive advantage.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. Councillor Jackie, please. Still, yeah,
Sorry, yeah, no, I put my hand up by mistake. It's not meant to be up there, so apologies.
Okay.
Well, other than I can say well done to Wayne, because I know he's worked extremely hard on this.
Good stuff, good stuff. Any members want to bring in any points now before we move on? Councillor Peter James, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a sort of a question that I just want to sort of clarification is, how does Powers police the identification of the suppliers in their reduction? and that they're actually, it's a true reading, if that makes sense, and they're doing what they say is on the tin.
I think there's a number of sort of strands to that. I think the identifying, and we're taking a sort of, like I say, a cascade approach about looking at the high spend areas first and really trying to get a granular level of data to understand what is the actual emissions. The methodology that is issued by Welsh Government is very limited, and actually makes it very difficult to actually measure reductions using that sort of calculator effect. The aim is to get more granular level of data to make sure we can identify where it is and make those reductions on a more sort of wider scale of making sure that they deliver what they said on the tin. We're also introducing a new contract management framework approach, which takes a series of elements of criteria to tier our supply chain. So that includes contract value, it would include the level of carbon emissions, it would include various different risks and complexities around a contract, and that will identify the level of contract, be it a platinum contract, which is high risk, high value, and therefore rightly it would attract a high level of scrutiny from the organisation, down to a bronze contract, which we're a bit more light to touch, because it's low value and low risk. Under each of those tiers, we are in this new framework I'm introducing, will set out about how you should manage a contract based on this tier. So if it's a platinum contract, high level of frequency, high level of intensity of contracts, so really holding them to account of all the things they said in their within their tender and therefore in the contract. And that's the mechanism to do it. So we take a risk-based approach to managing our contracts and making sure we're dedicating our resources to those areas that are the biggest, present the biggest sort of challenge or biggest risk to the organisation. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Okay, members, any other questions on this report? I think everything's been answered, hasn't it? So, yep. Well, thank you very much, Wayne, for that.
Thank you all. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you. Okay, we're on to item number 10, the Buildings, Land and Climate Change Plan to receive a Buildings and Land Climate Change Plan. I believe, Gwilym, you will be presenting this.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The Building and Land Action Plan is a work in progress. It's not as developed as the Procurement Action Plan that you have seen. The action plan has been published, so I'm not going to go through each action, but you can see there that we are making progress there, and there are some very positive actions being taken. Eco 4 being implemented by the Housing Department is very positive in relation to introduction of solar panels, air source heat pumps, as well as insulation and other technology such as batteries, which is something that is coming into play now. You've got the optimized retrofit program, again, being implemented by the Housing Department on their own existing properties. Then in relation to education facilities, you've got the SALEX program being implemented by the council with schools, introducing new lighting, LED lighting, which is making savings for the schools and making buildings more efficient and sustainable. Then you've got the newer asset collaboration program, which was introduced last year, which again has assisted schools with community centres, where you've seen surveys being undertaken of the schools to understand how best to make them sustainable. And then you have had some capital being spent on those schools, which again is making significant progress. So there are some really good actions being taken there. What I would say, though, is in order to meet our ambitions, we have to be realistic about what has to take place going forward. We need to be very, very ambitious as a council. But in order to do this, we have to have a better understanding of our assets. This can be done via a number of different ways, such as measuring emissions, and acknowledge what Wayne stated before about recording of those. But we really do need to get into detail so we understand our assets from that perspective, but also in relation to doing condition surveys and sustainability assessments. If we understand our assets, we'll be able to make more informed decisions going forward. And that is vital when it comes to value for money and get the maximum amount of progress from your investment. The other thing that we need to ensure that happens is collaboration. Now, internally, I think these action plans have made significant progress. Although the action plan that's in front of you, you see planning, public protection, property in their own things, that we are all discussing what we are doing together, and ideas are coming out of that. For example, landfills be managed by our public protection team. Now we're looking with our strategic property team about what can we do there. They've got settlement ponds which require electric 24/7. Can we have solar panels there? Can they be used for planting trees to offset? We've got 18 closed landfill sites around the county. We should be utilising those assets, and it's only via that dialogue that those ideas are coming through. Another example where collaboration is required is with other organisations, other parties. We cannot just be looking at this as a council. We need to be working with Paris Teaching and Health Board, NRW, fire, police, etc., to ensure that we are making, again, informed decisions, are aware of what each other are doing, and taking advantage of all the opportunities that collaboration will achieve. So I thought I'd just introduce that, Chair, and then I'm open to all questions.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Any questions from members? Don't be shy. How about you, Jake? Do you have anything to add as the portfolio holder on that?
No, I don't, but I'm here to help Gwilym out with any questions, should there be any.
We do have a question from Councillor Adrian Jones, please.
Thanks, Carl. I hope you can hear me because my internet's breaking up a bit. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Yes, Councillor Adrian. Oh, you've just dropped out again.
Question is about the farm state revenue.
You've just
Can you
dropped
hear me
out again. You just dropped out again. Try switching your screen off.
Okay.
Try that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Have you said a meeting of the farm working group, and tenants were expressing their frustration that they can't access things like Eco4 warm wheels, and those houses don't come into any category. Where do we sit as a council in getting those houses up to scratch?
I think in Councillor Adrian was that some of us sit on the farm estates group, and some of the houses there cannot access the Eco4 policy that's out there at the moment.
That's right, yes.
Right, okay. Gwilym, would you like to answer that question?
I think in relation to the farm estates, the biggest thing that's going to progress now is that we are doing condition surveys and sustainability surveys of the farm estate buildings. Now, this will enable us as a council to make, again, informed decisions about what we do with the farm buildings and how we direct the limited investment that we have, limited resources into the farm estate to make the maximum impact there. So those surveys are being undertaken as we speak and should be available within the next few months, and that will then help the decision-making progress going forward.
Good news. Councillor Adrian, do you want to come back on that? Are you happy with that answer?
Sorry, Chair.
I think you said you were happy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Councillor Karuna Kenyon-Wade, please.
Hello. Yes. Sorry, I don't understand about settlement ponds on landfills needing 24/7 electric. And you said there was an opportunity for maybe solar at some of these landfill sites.
In relation to the settlement ponds, they often require aeration in order to dispose of some of the chemicals that are coming out of the landfill. So it requires electricity supply 24/7. I'm not stating that there'd be a huge demand for electric, because the equipment hopefully is efficient, but it does still require electric, and that needs to be addressed. So there probably would be grant schemes hopefully available, and that's the work that the property team are doing now, is exploring whether we can get grants in order to implement that infrastructure.
And does that mean you could have almost like a solar farm on various acres? Yeah.
I wouldn't say solar farm. Because you need the grid connection. What we are looking at is, because there is a usage there, then we can get solar powers to address that usage. But that's not to say that we shouldn't be looking at the infrastructure that is available to us to take advantage of our estate, to look into renewable energy.
If you had a connection, lovely.
If we had a connection.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, when you have a landfill site, you have what is known as leachate that comes off the landfill site. For that to be exported to sewer, you have to break down the ammonia in that, and you use a number of chemicals and bugs, and the aeration, as Gwilym rightly pointed out, is there to deliver that aeration to the bugs, which break down those pollutants. Councillor Peter James, please.
Thank you, Chair. Gwilym, just under the planning recruitment situation, is there going to be sort of new officers under the climate action plan? And because it's quite a big respect on that, and will the officers be able to sort of carry out that, or do you need to get other officers in to understand the remit of the action plan? Does that make sense?
It does. In relation to recruitments, most of the actions there are business as usual actions. I have to state that. And if we are going to move forward more ambitiously, we, in my opinion, we do need to invest in appropriate resources. I would be stating more project managers would be required in order to progress certain projects, especially if it's you're talking about solar panels, LED lighting, or what I think is the key thing is understanding our state, which is condition surveys. That is a big piece of work in its own right. Now, that kind of progress is going to take, in my opinion, a number of years. In our property strategy, we're looking to do surveys or condition assessments every 5 years. We're trying to push that now, I have to say, in order to make sure that we are meeting our council's ambitions. Once we have an understanding of those condition surveys, then we can put a plan in place and proper costings as well, but we're not quite there yet. But I will be in the next budget phase trying to get more resources for this.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you, Will. Thank you.
The Welsh targets are 2030 and the central government's targets are 2050. I think we're going to miss them both, in my opinion. And then that is until Welsh government and central government work together to expand our electric network we have in the British Isles. Until that happens, it's going to be very difficult, in my opinion, to meet those targets. I think that the work that Powys is doing is really good, it's really encouraging. But until we have that wraparound, view on things, and we have National Grid really investing in Mid Wales and Powys in general, I think we're going to be up against it to meet those targets. I'll be perfectly blunt, and that's I live and breathe it every day. So yeah, that's my view on it. Councillor Jake, please.
Yeah, without wishing to extend that point further, because I have to dash away for another meeting shortly in any event, the work that we're doing on the local area energy plan for Powys certainly backs up what you're saying there, Councillor Carl, around the paucity of network that we have. So the work that Willem and the team have been doing, looking at our estate as a whole, not just the farm estate, but our property estate, landfill sites you've heard there, to look at the potential, is not really at this point about feeding into the grid, because the feedback we have is the grid won't take it. So what Willem and the team are doing is rightly saying, so okay, so what do we need for ourselves? So how can we reduce the energy cost by some solar panels to directly impact on an energy demand that we have here? And of course, you can take that across to our buildings, our school buildings, you know, so, or indeed our depots, to say, what does energy look like in those places in the future, and what more can we do to make them fit for purpose? And of course, that then spirals around the fitness of purpose of the site, the location, and all of that. But you're absolutely right in everything you say, Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jake. Councillor Jackie Charlton, please.
Yes, I have put my hand up on the right place this time. Yeah, I would like to endorse what Councillor Jake has said there. And I think we've got two angles to this. What can we do? And let's do it. What can't we do, and what can we do about that? And I think you're right, we do need to lobby to the Welsh Government and to central government around the national grid. And it's not just us. I think this has really come up the agenda in the last week or so. There is a real need for us to address that problem. Nothing has been done since the 1960s, I believe, to address that problem. And they're looking at offshore grid input as well as onshore grid. It's all a bit complicated. But you're absolutely right. And I'd just like to add as well around what Councillor Peter was saying, you know, is how can we ensure that we've got the right officers in the right place doing the right things too. We're also looking at transformation. So that's something that we're in the process of doing at the moment. We're waiting for a report to come back to us, which should be by the end of July. And I think that Diane Reynolds will be sharing that with the Scrutiny Committee sometime in August. That will feed into the transformation programme so that we can build up a business case around how we want to apply that transformation money. At the moment, we've had very little of the transformation money. It's gone mainly to education. So we're looking at building that up so that we can actually apply for some of that transformation money to help us through. So I hope that helps with the questions as well. But thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Jackie. Okay, are we all happy on that? I think so. Okay, let me just go back to my agenda, which is, we're on item number 11, I believe, which is the Governance Climate Action Plan. Okay.
That's me, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So I've been asked to attend this afternoon to provide an overview of the Governance Action Plan, which I shared as part of the supplementary agenda pack. The action plan forms part of the wider collective action being undertaken by the Council to deliver upon our climate emergency declaration and our commitment to Welsh Government's 2030 public sector targets. The governance action plan is similar to the other action plans. So as Gwilym said, it is a work in progress. It is something that we are working very hard to really refine and develop and cost up, so then we can really start to target collectively where we need to identify funding and where we need to prioritize resource in the areas that we can have the most impact. So the action plan identifies action which will implement the Council's climate change strategy through a newly formed climate and nature programme as part of the wider Council's transformation portfolio. It is to embed the commitment and importance. The Council and senior leadership team took the decision this programme as part of to emphasise and embed the commitment and importance the Council places with regards to climate and nature mitigation and adaptation, and is a key priority within our corporate strategy, Stronger, Fairer, Greener. So the Governance Action Plan has been developed around 7 key themes which we feel must be considered an action to meet our collective net zero ambitions. These include embedding climate and nature into the heart of the organisation and our Council's operations, behavioural change, governance, monitoring and evaluation, proactive communications and engagement, funding and how we fund a net zero just transition, partnership and collaborative working, and the local to national and national to local dynamic. So how we inform and embed national strategy and policy direction on a local level. So I thought it'd be useful to mention some of the pieces of work which have been developing alongside further development of and refinement of the action plan to give you a sense of what we've been doing, and to assure members that we aren't just waiting for a perfect plan to be in place before we take action forward. It is running in parallel, because 2030 is only 7 years away. So without going through the whole plan, just to pick out a few bits of work that we've been taking forward as part of the governance action plan. So working with the transformation department service and our nature colleagues and colleagues within Wayne's commercial services department, we've been looking at the impact assessment, and we've been strengthening the impact assessment that the council officers have to undertake as part of taking decisions through the council for funding, to really consider nature in a lot more detail, the impacts that has, positive and negative, and how we can mitigate and ensure that resilience is in place for the decisions we're making as a council. We've continued to strengthen that by ensuring that the training element as part of the impact assessment has detail, and there are clear links to officers on climate and nature, where people can reach to get some further support and guidance. We've been developing a climate and nature e-learning module, again in collaboration with nature, sustainable procurement and wider officers, to really ensure that we are hitting all the key areas, all the key areas around climate, nature, sustainability, social value, circular economy, that will really start to embed and build the knowledge and understanding across our officers, across services, and getting officers to really start to consider the impacts of their daily lives, the work of their services, but also their own individual personal decisions that they make, and how that will impact positively and negatively on climate and nature. So we've been developing that, and the plan is to take that to the Green Network, which has been set up as a collective group of officers across different services in the organisation, as a first port of call to really help shape that and really test it as a first peer group, before we then take that and look to embed that within the council. Obviously, it becomes more difficult to provide training for people who are frontline services, so we're also considering how we can bring out some of the key messages that can be provided to those frontline staff in a more practical way. In terms of the programme, we've been embedding governance arrangements, so we have a number of working groups, a number of different officer and officer member groups in place. We've just launched a couple of weeks ago a climate stakeholder group, which brings together internal officers and members, but also external organisations, and provides the ability for them to share ideas, challenge us, and really work with us to ensure that our net zero ambitions for the council, but also how we decarbonise the county as well, is really developed in a collaborative way, open, transparent. We've held a town and community council climate and nature event. It was very well received and very well attended. We had I think 100 attendees. 50 of those were town and community councils. We had 25 organisations across climate and nature who were present, who were presenting, but also there on the day with information stands, advice, guidance, and we are developing a resource pack, which we are looking to send out ASAP. It's just waiting with translation. There's a lot of work ongoing around the grid, and as you quite rightly said, Chair, it is a massive issue, and it will constrain us in our abilities to meet 2030 and 2050 targets. So we are developing work on the Mid Wales energy strategy and now the action plan, and that does feed into local area energy plans, which I think we've had 3 meetings and we've got another meeting coming up this week. Those will both feed up into national bits of work like the Future Grid Wales work, and also we did some work to feed into the consultation on Welsh Government's renewable energy targets, and it was pleasing to see some of the outcomes of that where it was launched, the outputs where Julie James was speaking, and she was mentioning some of the wording that we had explicitly said in our response. So our finger's certainly on the pulse, and we're affecting that change at that national level. There's a lot more detail in the action plan, Chair, but in the interest of time, I will stop there, but welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any questions from members of the committee, please? I think it's quite self-explanatory, the chart there, but if there are any questions or someone has concerns about some of the reds there. Nope. Okay, good stuff. I'm going to make a, sorry, Councillor Jackie.
Just to make a comment, really, not to ask any questions, but just to say that I think we've moved forward a tremendous amount in the last 12 months. There's an awful lot of work that's gone into these action plans. You don't quite appreciate it, I don't think, when you see the action plans, the amount of work that goes on underneath that and the time that it takes to do it. So I really would like to congratulate the officers for really working hard on this in all kinds of areas, and do the really important thing, which is to collaborate together. And the Green Network is a staff network which is going to meet on a regular basis, and I think that will also help to improve that as we're going forward. But just to give a big thank you, but I would welcome scrutiny from this scrutiny committee as we go forward. The challenges that you put will help us to move things forward. I'm never ever worried about challenges, so please do keep challenging us, and let's see what we can do to break down those barriers that we know that are there. But just to thank everybody for their attention this afternoon and the work that's gone on behind this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackie. I'm sure we will challenge you at every stage to make sure those decisions are right for the taxpayer. Councillor David Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can see there's a red there with regard to council climate action plans to be costed. It is something that I've been concerned about, but at the same time, that shouldn't detract from the fact that there's an enormous amount of work happening within the authority around climate action plans. But I have expressed concern that we do need some of these plans costed as soon as possible, because obviously we are under significant financial pressure. We need to build these plans into our service IBPs, etc. Some of the larger projects obviously are going to require assistance from both national government and Welsh government, but it's good to see the amount of work that's being done there, and it's good to see now that we've got this emphasis on getting some of these plans costed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Wise words there. Is it okay if we go to the last item in the reflection period, because there's one or two things I think that Rachel needs to go through with us? Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So if you can end the recording. So I'd like to thank all the officers that presented today, cabinet members as well, members here in the committee and members watching at home, and members of the press and public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll leave now because I think this is your reflection, isn't it? It's not ours. Thank you.
Thank you.